If I told you that there was an easier way to rob a bank, a way that is more effective than wielding a gun and wearing a mask in a banking hall, would you believe me? If I told you that the real bank robbers wear suits and sit on the boards of the same banks that they rob, would you be afraid? And if I told you that this kind of crime will not end soon, would you call me a liar? Well, this is according to the economics of crime. If the profit is greater than the punishment, then the crime will be committed again and again and again. This is the story of financial gangsters. From bank founders who plundered depositors' funds to bank managers who facilitate creative accounting to cover up fraud. From politicians who use such banks to launder money and central bank officials who are compromised. From auditors who are part of the scheme to parastatal CEOs who channel public funds to the said banks. In the last 40 years, at least 30 institutions have collapsed due to fraud and insider dealings. Unfortunately, 90% of these banks have been plundered by their founders, managers, and powerful politicians. They follow an intricate layering of ownership where the main shareholders are shell-holding companies that are in turn owned by powerful individuals. The first ever Kenyan banking institution to collapse was in 1984, known as Rural Urban Credit Finance, owned by the former Nairobi mayor, Ngomba. You might know him because of an estate in Nairobi named after him. Other banks to have collapsed include Dubai Bank, Chase Bank, Prudential Bank, Trade Bank, Union Bank, City Finance Bank, and others. A recurring theme in most of the banks discussed here is that the perpetrators are of Indian origin, from A.J. Shah of Trust Bank, Abdul Malek Jan Mohammed of Imperial Bank, Fidosh Jamal of Eurobank, Kamlesh Patni of Exchange Bank and Pan-African Bank, and the Shah brothers of the Charterhouse Bank. Is it a coincidence that all these banks are collapsing with Kenyan money but under Indian frauds? Or is it a case of Indian state capture, with the supporting cast being Kenyans with political ambitions? The fundamental role of a bank is the safekeeping of the depositors' money. Kenyans from all walks trusted these banks with their savings. They further trusted the CBK to regulate the practice and monitor the reporting in order to avoid losses. However, the insiders used the money to enrich themselves, collectively causing Kenyans to lose close to 1 trillion shillings. 1 trillion. To put it in perspective, is an unimaginable amount of money that, if correctly used, would never have to see the eyes of a hungry child again. You know how I know it's a lot of money? If you would lay 1,000 shillings notes end to end, 1 trillion shillings would make a string of 150,000 kilometers. That is enough to go around the earth 11 times. If you were the one tasked with laying these notes, and you spent approximately 5 seconds to lay each note, you would need 160 years to finish the job. 1 trillion shillings is how much money Kenya uses to run the education, defense, agriculture, and public works ministries in 1 year. But that is how much the economic gangsters have stolen through the banks. Eurobank and Trade Bank. Eurobank went down after Francis Atwoli whistle blew on the scandal when 256 million of NSSF money disappeared in the institution back in 2003. But to understand Eurobank, let us go back to 10 years earlier, when another bank collapsed, Trade Bank, 1993. Trade Bank was founded by an Israeli known as Al-Nul Qassam in 1982 with the help of one Nicholas Biwott. Trade Bank was formed to facilitate proceeds from corruption as well as financing projects by the elite political class of the day. In 1986, Kenya undertook a multi-billion project to create the Turkwell hydro generating dam. The company that was to undertake the project was handpicked by Mr. Biwott. The contract sum of the project was 3 times higher than it should have cost, meaning that 2/3 of the money was profit for Mr. Biwott and his political associates. If that money had passed through just any bank, then questions would have risen immediately. But because Biwott indirectly owned the bank that he helped Al-Nul Qassam found, then he had a free way of laundering the money. Tradebank had a forex trade department where it operated foreign accounts and foreign currency accounts. At the heart of that department was one Solomon Muthamia, a young Meruman who was 26 turning to 27 when he met Biwott. Biwott, through Al-Nul Qassam, asked the young man, Solomon, to dedicate his entire time moving some money from Kenya to foreign bank accounts in the name of forex trading. At first, Solomon did not know that the billions he was going to handle from 1986 to around 1991 were the illegal proceeds from the Takwel Dam project. But with time, he learned that the money was dirty. So dirty that even Biwott or Al-Nul Qassam had no idea as to how much money was being delivered to Solomon in briefcases every day at the trade bank. So Solomon was now fully entrusted with laundering of the proceeds of Takwel Goj on behalf of Biwott, Moi, and other politicians in the late 80s. Biwott's funds were being channeled to bank accounts located in Germany and the UK. Solomon Muthamia simultaneously opened personal accounts with the same foreign banks, facilitating the transfer of funds for his own use. Within 3 years, he had schemed off close to 100 million shillings at the tender age of 27 years. With the safety of dollars in Europe, Muthamia was able to issue foreign checks to local Asians during the foreign exchange crunch, during which process he made hefty profits. Meanwhile, Mr. Qassam had overwhelming influence in the operations of Tradebank. He used that power to enjoy unauthorized credit. He obtained colossal amount of money by faking documents to obtain pre-shipment finance for fictitious exports. Mr. Qassam, using Tradebank, had defrauded the CBK close to 2 billion shillings. But towards 1993, Tradebank had a lot of non-performing loans that caused it liquidity problems. Amongst the people who owed Tradebank a lot of money was Nicholas Biwott. He owed close to 1 billion shillings. Tradebank attached one of Mr. Biwott's properties, the Yaya Center. Along Agwings Kodek Road, on plot number LR 209/10670, on which Yaya Center and 2 apartment blocks are constructed, the west wing still remains unfinished over 30 years later, the only ruin left from Tradebank. Eventually, Muthamia's dealings were discovered by investigators, forcing him to flee from Tradebank. Muthamia, through his connection with Kilonzo, the former police commissioner, was able to prevent any investigation from going ahead. Mr. Qassam fled the country as Tradebank doors were closed. Interestingly, one of the people who lost their jobs after Tradebank collapsed was James Mwangi, the founding CEO of Equity Bank. He was the finance manager at Tradebank. In 1993, noticing the gap that had been created by the fall of Tradebank, Muthamia used Tradebank's connections to start his own bank, Eurobank. He had the support of Eric Kotut at Central Bank, and his godfather was the all-powerful minister in the Kano regime, Nicholas Biwott. He had enough capital from the 100 million shillings that he had made from his clandestine dealings by skimming off Biwott's loot. His other directors were Fidos Jamal, Mr. Zachary Kamondo, and the then KRA Commissioner General, John Munge. Although soft-spoken, Muthamia was shrewd and well connected. Using an elaborate network of contacts in high places, he was able to get all major parastatals to bank with Eurobank, even when the government was promoting its own national bank. He promised high interest rates after short periods. These parastatals included NSSF, NHIF, the Kenya Pyrethrum Board, Kenya Wines Agency, the Kenyatta National Hospital, Post Bank, Kenya Tourist Development Corporation, Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Sugar Board, among others. It was such that 70% of total deposits in Eurobank belonged to the Kenyan parastatals. Easy and soft loans were extended to top civil servants, senior cops, and key politicians who could provide cover in case things went bad. Protectors included the Commissioner of Police, former heads of public service, CBK staff, senior Kenya politicians, and the banking fraud unit. More than 85% of the loans were to such politicians, and they were non-performing. After 10 years of looting, the bank would start facing liquidity problems. It was then that Atuoli raised the alarm. The directors fled. The parastatal heads were questioned. But, as you can guess, the parastatals had already lost 1.8 billion shillings to Muthamia and his associates. The NSSF lost 256 million. Kenyatta National Hospital lost 421 million shillings. The National Hospital Insurance Fund lost 479 million shillings. Other state corporations that lost money were the Post Office Savings Bank 65 million shillings, the Kenya Tourist Development Corporation 60 million shillings, the Kenya Pipeline Company 55 million shillings, Postal Corporation of Kenya 53 million shillings, and the Kenya Sugar Board 55 million shillings. The collapse of Eurobank also claimed the career of Nahashon Nyaga, who was the then Central Bank of Kenya governor. Coming up on the Economics Gangster Bank Sedition Part 2. In 1993, when Eurobank was opening its doors, Kamlesh Patni, Abdulmalek Mohammed, and the Shahs were also opening their banks. Imperial Bank was one. For the next 15 years, the founder would use it as a personal piggy, leading to the loss of close to 40 billion shillings of depositors' funds.